So there's a conspiracy going around with this deck. The theory goes that Flagburg is just an encounter deck for Glory Maelstrom, but since people hated the encounter cards, they changed it last minute to be its own deck. That's why a lot of this deck's support is generic and way more Aqua Force than other decks. In any case, today we're talking about Flagburg, the Aqua Force deck that removes all of its own soul and isn't even live till turn 3. Wow, Aqua Force has really gone downhill. If the deck can overcome its own brickiness, the goal of this deck is to hit the opponent with 4 rearguard attacks turn 3, then finish off the opponent with a guard-restricted Vanguard. Before we continue, the effect on Flagburg that says your opponent picks 2 units to retire is a typo. In JP, it says you pick. I'm sorry for the negativity, but Bushiroad really didn't give a shit about this deck, huh? Let's just go into the deck list. So our 2 main multi-attackers are Ascendant's Assault and High-Rate Burst Dragon. High-Rate Burst Dragon lets us Counterblast and Soul Blast to choose another rearguard to have restand after the first battle each turn. Ascendant's Assault lets us restand him after another rearguard attacks. I bet you're now noticing the 2 specific requirements for restanding. This means that this deck has a very set attack order. This lets your opponent know how to guard around your board. We're trying to use these cards to attack just enough for opponent to not be able to guard anyway. The other cards in our main deck are about supporting the 2 main cards. Aggress Blue Dragon is a simple restanding after attacking rearguard. We did it, boys. Better Dragonic Overlord. But seriously though, this card helps set up your Vanguard skill if you're missing one of the 2 main pieces. If you look at our ride line, we can see that the 2 units leave us with no fucking soul. Thanks, Bushiroad. So we have to run this piece of shit card. I spent way too long trying to build a hype version of this deck, but the ride line just fucks over this deck shit. But you need to run the ride line for consistency, so there's just no good options. Either build a consistent restand and have no room for techs, or try to run a dysfunctional ride line that doesn't really work for the deck. So yeah, we run 4 Blooming Peta, Cariophilus. Alright, so let's talk about why this deck runs Ghost Chase and Conspiring Mutant Adamantis. Ghost Chase is pretty simple, as 3 of our main cards have on-place effects, so Ghost Chase lets us take advantage of that and get a little guard while doing it. We run Adamantis because the multi-attacking rearguards don't hit over 13k on their own. Yeah, it's a bit depressing, but we're trying. This card is also a good option to rush turn 2, and it can still help boost on turn 3. We run 8 crits to make sure our Vanguard swing is scary, and we have to run effect crits for soul. They're not optional in this deck. We run draws because our deck literally can't proc fronts, even though it would be very helpful. Basically, for Mulligan, we're looking for any units. Look for Burst Dragon, Ascendant's Assault, and Cariophilus as our main boys. Really, anything is solid. Keep the effect crits if you don't have Cariophilus. Keep other crits and PGs if you need to be defensive. Ghost Chase is good to keep if you already have your main pieces, elsewise just put it back. And Persona rides only matter if you plan on going to late game. Put back everything else. There's a big problem with this deck's matchups. Did you brick or not determines so much in this deck. Your Bruce matchup isn't terrible if you don't brick, but if you do, it's just suffering. What this deck should be good at is pushing out turn 4 decks that need to really wait a bit to go off. But this deck can't do that if it doesn't see its main pieces. This deck is also massively hurt by retiring and any bit of removal. As such, Eugene, Seraph Snow, Clarissa, and Gravidia are really painful matchups. Also, Laronarol just sprints through this deck. This deck also struggles to compete with every other deck this format thanks to its abysmally low numbers. Your key pieces aren't even grade 3s, so they need help sometimes to even hit over the Vanguard. And God forbid your opponent hits a defensive check. Got a new segment here in my deck profiles, where I break down prices of decks. Full price is about $65, but most of that's from PGs and expensive triggers. If these staples were a bit cheaper, the deck should be a nice budget option for about $17. I do recommend picking up the new effect crits as an extra soul charge option. I can't wait for these staples to just slowly creep up in price and severely limit the growth of the game. Despite everything wrong with this deck, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 on power against my better judgment. This is because it is a 5 attack deck on turn 3 if it goes off. Flagburg itself is one of the best guard restricts in the game. This deck is live turn 3, so it's a 3 out of 5 on speed. This deck retires 2 units at the end of turn, so it does technically have a control aspect. 1 out of 5 on control. This deck needs a lot of specific pieces in hand to work. The ride line is a bad band-aid to this problem. 1 out of 5 on consistency. This deck can gain an extra multi-attack on a rearguard and use Ghost Chase to make some interesting plays. This deck does a bit of everything, albeit not well. 2 out of 5 on versatility. This deck makes you drop so much to make it work, and you really don't get anything in return outside of a single draw from the Vanguard swing. 1 out of 5 on value. I can't recommend this deck to anyone. Just play Barrow Magnus or Magnolia instead. Both of these decks do what this deck does, but better. Barrow even has Guard Restrict now. This deck feels as bad as the encounter decks. Even without the conspiracy, I can't help but call it one. Thanks for watching. Working on some new content, since y'all really like the tier list, I'm gonna see if I can make some more content like that in future. See you next time.